So today we're talking to Shaleen and Shilpi Shah, the founders of Luvin Arms Animal Sanctuary in Colorado. Shaleen and Shilpi were all from a Jain background, and so you must have some familiarity with Banjapurs in India. How does Luvin Arms differ? Maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about how the mission differs from simply caring for animals, which is also really important and part of our practice of Jivya.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest difference, Luvin Arms in the Panjapols in India that we've visited is that we try to educate the public who come to the sanctuary that animals have their own lives, and we don't, once they're at the sanctuary, that's their home, and we don't use any of the milk or even the poop for any of our human benefits, and we try to educate the public about why we should include them in our circle of our compassion and not use them for any of our means.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Banjapals in India, they really serve really good purpose, right? Like they're trying to rescue these animals from being slaughtered. And I think the part that we're not talking about when we're talking about Panjapals is how do we solve the root cause of why these animals are suffering? Like why is it that there is millions of cows in India that are on the streets? Why is it that India is one of the largest beef exporters when beef isn't really consumed in the country as much? So when we ask those questions and we think about how do we solve it in the root cause, then that is really where I think Luvin Arms is different, is because we're trying to solve the root cause of animal suffering.
That's really, really important. And I can say, having toured recently, that the way that the public is educated about how the animals came to this condition and how it's related to their choices of diet, very importantly, helps to get to that root cause.
Yeah.
Hearing, for example, Tito's story, what happened to him, and being able to hug Tito, being able to make a connection with the animals is very powerful.
Yeah.
They tell their own story.
Yeah.
Even when we have tours, however much information is given about their rescue and their story, their eyes say a lot more than what we can say. And people who do connect, they keep thinking about those with the names. They keep thinking about them when they're at the grocery store, and then they start realizing, I can't eat Tito, or I can't eat Alfie, and they have just as many emotions and as humans. Yeah. And just the way they communicate, we don't understand. With some of our programs, we're trying to bring a common language between humans and them, and it's
like clicker play.
With clicker play, yes. And it's amazing how smart they are, and than humans.
Yeah,
all species.
But there's also a tension, because the care of these individuals is important, and you are a sanctuary that really works on high quality care, and yet there's such a large volume of animals that are suffering that you can't rescue everyone either.
Yeah.
And I think you've kind of faced the question of should we purchase animals, or should we rescue them that way?
Right.
How do you deal with that?
So when we first started the sanctuary and had not really given it that depth of thought, we did purchase animals, right? So the very first horses that we rescued, we went to this auction and we purchased them. what we didn't think about at that time, and it came to us after, is when we purchase animals from being slaughtered or in any kind of condition, where does that money go? And what is the effect of that money, right? Because you're now participating in an economic transaction. And if the person that is selling you the animal, in their core beliefs, in their core actions, will just continue to do the same thing, then by giving them money, you're essentially just perpetuating that same thing. You're not solving anything. And so when we look at like the economic system, there is a supply and demand. So as long as there is a demand for people to purchase animals out of slaughterhouses or out of situations where they're being rescued, then there will be an increased supply, right? So a lot of times I see, and I know like we've participated in the past as well, where we've given money to save lives, and a lot of times our community does that in tens of thousands.
There's a long history of that.
There's a long history of that, and which I think comes from a really great place in our culture, our values, our heart. But what we need to start thinking about is that when we do that in such a large volume, we're essentially creating a demand. So if we purchase 10,000 cows or goats this year, then that means that demand went up, and so the next year the farmers are going to produce 10,000 extra goats or cows to meet the demand of the other people who are looking to buy them for meat. So it is an economic system that we have to think about and really come to a solution that actually addresses it at its cause.
And for that, it's trying to educate people on their food choices, so there's not a demand for meat and even milk and eggs, other products like that. It's like what you were saying, that the impulse to connect with the individual can lead to good changes, dietary changes, but it can also be the impetus for wanting to buy animals from auctions. We have to sort of use that impulse to connect with individual stories in the direction that's going to lead to the greatest benefit, knowing that we're in this complex economic system.
There was this statistic that I recently learned that it's over 88,000 individuals are killed for food every single second.
Wow.
So when you think about a scale that large, there is no amount of rescue in the world that can solve that problem, right?
And then the thing I think Jains don't in our conventional culture recognize is the connection between our consumption of milk and the export of meat and the eating of meat and the continuation of the market for meat. Maybe remind us a little bit about that.
So I think any economic use of any animal, right, contributes to their suffering. Doesn't matter if we're using them for their milk or eggs or meat or even just the fertilizer, right? Like taking their poop and pee that I know in our Ayurvedic scriptures, they prescribe that, and any economic use of an animal leads to their suffering, because it then becomes a factory to just extract that resource. And
pregnant mare's urine in the example of a medication that's used.
In horses. There's
right.
a Premarin, right? So they're and it was the same with Belle, the horse that we rescued. She was tied up, kept pregnant all the time, and horses and cows, just like humans, are pregnant for 9 months, and then they usually only have one baby, and then while they're pregnant is when their urine is extracted to make this medicine for women for menopause. But again, it's the demand for the medicine is what's going to keep the suffering going for the horses. And to me it's hard, because when I went vegan and Arav, my older one, was born, the idea of him being away from me for even a few seconds was so hard to imagine. And then here we are making all these animals, they're pregnant. We forcefully get them pregnant, and then when they have a baby, they're taken away within the first hour.
Yeah.
And we've seen, like with Tito, he was rescued when he was 10 days old, and for the longest time you could see his tears in his eyes all the time, even though he was getting so much affection, so much love from humans. This is not the same as getting it from his own mother.
Yeah.
So he was missing his mother, and it's just, when you see it's hard, and we are doing that consistently with so many animals, and against their wishes.
Yeah.
So it's just like, against, if somebody's doing things against our wishes, how angry and upset we would be.
Yeah.
And I think we just because they can't speak, or we can't understand that they're being exploited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that individualization, helps so much for people, right? Because when us as humans, and it's kind of programmed into us that we think of others as a group, we don't think of others in a individual, right? Then we do that in religion, we do that in people from different countries. We think of people as a group. So instead of thinking of cows as just cows, when you really look at them individually and can experience or observe their individual experience of life, that can really shift and move you in so many ways. Yeah. And just like Tito, the story of all the cows, Tito's best friend at Luvin Arms was Leroy. And Leroy suffered through some disease, and when he went to the hospital, all the cows came up and were crying. And unfortunately Leroy did not make it back from the hospitals.
I think they waited for 2 days.
Yeah,
they didn't go out to the pasture, and they waited in that area for Leroy to come back. And Tito was there, because Shartrina said, and the caregivers, they're like, Tito is not going out into the pasture. Yeah. He's just waiting there for Leroy to come back. And it's just hard because they don't get that kind of closure. Yeah. We do have, grief counselors that come, and or therapists or healers that come and try to connect with these animals by healing them and figuring out what they're feeling just by the energy. And there is recent interaction that happened where the healer came and said that Tito really misses Leroy. Wow. And he feels he's lonely here, even though he has so many other cows. Like, there are 7 other cow friends, but I think that bond that he created with Leroy, it's like us, missing our mom and dad, or brother, sister, son, daughter. It's
nobody can replace that relationship.
So.
And you can really see that in them, and it, when you connect to that story, it can really shift your perception, your belief system, and then your choices that you make that affect millions of others just like them.
So thank you for doing this ongoing, continuing, demanding, but fulfilling work, and giving people the opportunity to hear from you directly. And if you haven't already visited Luvin Arms, it's worth a visit.
Yes. Please come and see us.
Please come and see us and all the animals at Luvin Arms.